My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that procurement and sourcing plays in the way that we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a person with a passion for procurement value and digitalization, bringing over 25 years of working experience within the industry. He's consulted numerous global businesses during his 17 years as the owner and managing director of Buyers United. In 2022, he finished off a doctorate in business administration and shortly founded GoBeyondProcurement, a venture providing training and development in bespoke AI solutions for procurement. Welcome to the show, Mr. Pascal Evertz.
Thank you, Mr. Sam, and very nice to be here again.
We're excited to have you on, and we would love to start with a question that we ask a lot of those that have been on the show. What does sourcing and procurement mean to you, Pascal?
Well, I must say, Sam, I think that I love procurement and sourcing. Maybe it sounds a little bit strange, but having the opportunity to learn a lot from suppliers and also being participating in all kinds of projects is great, of course, because you can learn a lot. But definitely also making sure that you can connect the right persons and the right organizations together. I think that's really a big benefit of being in procurement and sourcing.
Yeah, you have the opportunity to play a unique role to bridge the gap, right, between internal stakeholders and suppliers. And I think that that's a fantastic power that procurement holds. What made you work in procurement? Did you choose the role or did it choose you?
Well, I must say, I think that like many, it chose me. And I'm still in it. So it must be something good. So otherwise I wouldn't be in it.
Right. And how did you get your start in the space?
Yeah, I started with a company and I started in logistics and from there I moved to more commercial procurement. Then I went into procurement consultancy, of course. Then after a couple of years, I started working for myself. And that is something what I've been doing since 2007. And I'm still doing that. So that's more or less how I got into procurement.
Lovely. For those of our listeners that don't really know much about Go Beyond Procurement, do you mind just briefly letting them know what you're doing at the organization?
Yeah, sure. So I think that Go Beyond Procurement, actually what we are doing is, of course, now everybody's talking about AI and there's a lot of buzz going on. But what we actually are doing is we're creating products which are helpful for procurement professionals. Myself, of course, have been in procurement many years. And what I've seen is that we can help them by, look at inefficient processes and help with AI. So for example, we created a AI procurement lawyer, which is helping public procurement professionals in their profession because public procurement is slightly different than private procurement. Right. Secondly, also we created a contract management system, which allows contract manager to get all of the data from the contract immediately instead of, having to type everything into the system and stuff like that, but also making much more analysis and so on. So that's the basic what we are providing at the moment. And then, of course, we also have some clients who want to have specialized AI products, for example, in operational procurement. And we also do some training to educate people about how to use AI safely, but also, get the maximum benefit from it.
Yeah, and I think that it poses an awesome benefit for the procurement function, that's sure. I think that, it's interesting. Some companies decide to apply AI and others choose within the tech space of procurement to lead with it as their value proposition, right? For me, I mean, AI is not a value prop. It's simply a means to be able to get to your value prop quicker. I'm curious because there's a lot of buzz in the space. You said it as well. How does one avoid the buzz within the AI space, either as a tech vendor, but also adversely as a practitioner on the other side of the business?
Well, first of all, you have to educate yourself and see what's available. Secondly, I would definitely recommend to follow a AI training from Go Beyond because then you will have a much better view about what is available. So, but look into what really matters in AI, and also educate yourself, learn about large language models, learn about their differences. And also at the moment, I would say simply use it, because I see a lot of procurement professionals, they are actually not using AI because they are not familiar with it. But you can easily open a Chat GPT free account and just try it and see for yourself what it can do.
Why do you think that businesses are maybe hesitant to start using it within the procurement space?
I think, Sam, it's with every software which you have or every new technology, people have to get used to the technology. So I think the technology is moving much more quicker than the people can. But so you have to give it time. It's like change management, and we all have a different way of perceiving information, and we all need time to adapt to changes. So yeah, I think that definitely that people need time to adapt, and some of them are a little bit quicker and otherwise take a little bit more time. But I think within a few years from now, everybody will be using AI in procurement.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I mean, we recognize, because we're in the procure tech space ourselves, of course, and a lot of companies we run across, it's still greenfield, right? They're still utilizing manual homegrown work tools to be able to manage their day-to-day, and/or the tools that they have aren't really cutting it. So they're still doing things outside within, bespoke work tools, Excel and alike, right? I guess it bodes the question, is procurement really ready for the next generation of technology? And if so, what do you think that they need to do to be able to get there?
Yeah, I think that they have to get ready for it, because if I look at AI, for example, it has a big impact on your productivity. And sometimes I get the question from people, they say, well, is AI replacing me as a procurement professional? I'm not thinking that will happen, but I'm absolutely sure that other procurement professionals which are using AI or using tech will be much more efficient and much more productive. So they will definitely replace those people who are not using it. And then, yeah, it's difficult for me to see why some organizations are applying it. But I think that also from an efficiency standpoint, if you can use tech and you become much more, how do you say that, competitive, for example, towards other organizations. I think that's especially for the private sector or private companies, it's a must-have. So for me, it's a no-brainer to go into tech and to go into automation, because if you don't, you will lose your competitiveness.
Yeah, I mean, it's competitiveness as a business, but as you said, also competitiveness on the market as an individual, right? And both are equally important in the equation. So Gartner published a study a few years ago that said 17% of procurement teams aren't happy with their tools. Why do you think that this is the case?
I think it's multi. There's several reasons for that. So maybe some of these systems, I've seen bigger systems like big ERP systems. I will not go into the names, but they tend to be very complex because there's a lot of features and a lot of spaces where you can put in data and stuff like that. And I think that sometimes those systems are too complex. So they are automating complex processes, but instead of automating complex processes, maybe they should have looked into simplifying the process and then automate it or something like that. And secondly, also what I see is when people are procuring software, sometimes they have a little bit of a testing and a little bit of a proof of concept, but there's not a lot of effort on the change management itself. So really make sure that you educate people and show them what is the impact on their process, having them onboarded early in the procurement software adaptation. I think that's really important. But it's a change, and as I mentioned, change takes time.
Yeah. And I mean, you can have all the groundswell you want and users that are excited about a technology or a top-down directive to say, we need this solution. But like you just said, right, if you're not managing the change, which inherently there's going to be, right, when adopting new technology, then it's going to be tough to be able to adopt new technology. Why do you think maybe that the procurement teams have such troubles with change management?
Well, that's a difficult one. It's depending. So maybe they are too busy and they like the way they are working or the old way of working, and they don't have sufficient time to really see at the new opportunities. Once people are used to a way of working, it's difficult to change that. So I'm not sure if they're typically procurement people, but I see where you're coming from. It looks like, that within procurement that we are lacking adaptation of tech, and that's a pity.
I think at the same time, though, I mean, the role has evolved a ton, right? I mean, look at where procurement is from 5 to 10 years ago today, right? Um, at the same time, I mean, there is an aspect of the role that it's adverse to risk, it's adverse to change in certain aspects because processes need to remain stringent to ensure that lines of supply are going to continue, especially in I'm thinking in a direct materials role of procurement and alike, right? So I mean, there is some, I think that there's some balance as to maybe in the role inherently why change management is difficult. But I think one thing is true, and this is again back to like a shift that we have made, is there is a focus on value today, not as much on cost anymore. And I want to talk a little bit about value with you because I know that it's a topic that you're passionate about. How can a procurement team, do you think, move from being so focused on just savings to being focused on innovation and value if they haven't yet made that shift?
Yeah, well, this is a great question, Sam. I really always get excited about it because I see that many procurement people struggle with value. You have to define what is value. What is procurement value, and that's a challenge. So what is the value procurement brings? And then we talk about innovation and supplier management and stuff like that. But to me, if you talk about value, you always talk about people. And I used to be a recruiter when I used to work also in that consultancy company. And I learned that if you have the best people available in your organization, you will always create value. So to me, the mindset of a procurement professional should be is that they are always looking for and identifying and utilizing a supplier expert, so that they are really looking, can I find the best expert available in the market? And sometimes we think that that expert is also the most expensive. But actually, I tend to disagree on that. So if you are a person with a lot of expertise and a lot of know-how, I think that in the end, you will always be much cheaper than somebody who doesn't know. So to me, finding an expert means that you will have a low total cost of ownership. But that's secondary, So first of all, you find the expert. And then once you have found them, you don't tell them what to do. You have them tell you what to do. And make sure that they are applying that expertise, because then your innovation will go up, they will make less mistakes, you will have increased productivity, you will have more innovation, and so on and so on. So to me, value is all related to people identifying the better vendors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that value is often brought back to a spreadsheet, right? So it's exactly what you're saying, right? It's the qualitative things that can't be quantified as much. I mean, how do you think a team best leverages a supplier's competency? Is there any tactics that you've seen companies use? Because while this sounds great on paper, it's difficult to make it happen in reality.
I think it's quite easy. It's not complicated at all. But we first have to understand that the information in the inside world, like being at a client or being at a procurement organization, is always limited compared to the information in the outside world. And secondly, then you have a different mindset. So if I assume that somebody else knows better than myself, in this case a supplier, why then would I bring them a big RFP document telling them what to do in having like maybe 100 or 200 requirements? It doesn't make sense, because if I'm looking for somebody who knows better than myself, they already know what is needed to be successful for me as a company. So therefore, I tend to simplify everything, meaning I'm not interested in having all these big RFP documents with all these big requirements. I simply go to what do we want to achieve? What is the objective? What is our goal? And then secondly, of course, I have to identify that expert. So I'm using data to identify if that expert is knowledgeable enough to achieve those objectives. So that's the first step. Then also what I see within procurement, often we are more working on paper. We are sending out a lot of documents, and then those documents are being returned, and then we have to evaluate and we have to discuss blah blah blah. And it's quite difficult to make a good decision based on documents and paper, because I think that you really should talk to the people who are doing the work. I'm not saying that you should talk to the account manager or the sales director. I'm not saying that they don't have a role, but you have to be very careful. You should talk to the people who are actually doing the work, and they will give you an honest answer, and they will tell you what can be done and what can be done. And once you have done a selection and you identified an expert vendor, you always have to be careful, because we know that within procurement and within a tender, the devil is in the details. So instead of after the selection phase immediately making an award, I always would recommend to have a clarification phase built in which together with the supplier, you can create a plan. And basically, once you do that, then you would be able to make the award after you have done that clarification phase, just to avoid that once you have made the award, that you all kinds of unpleasant surprises after the tender itself. So to me, selection, clarification, and then moving into the execution. And you have to make sure that during the execution, you also have some kind of a tooling available in which you can measure any deviation from what has been agreed. And to be honest, many times what I see in procurement is that it's, of course, the supplier has to make sure that they are offering what they have been proposed for what they have proposed, but also on the client side, we also see a lot of deviations in the execution itself, which are causing all kinds of issues in the project or delivering the services. So that's basically what I would do. Yeah.
Great insights. Great insights. I'm curious if we were talking about the tactics that are in procurement today versus those of yesterday, so to say, right? We've talked about the fact that procurement has evolved as a role and a function. I'm curious, is there tactics that you see still around today that you believe are soon going to be a thing of the past?
Well, let's hope, Sam, that win-lose thinking will be something of the past, because I've learned that if you are acting on a win-lose, it always will be a lose-lose. So to me, that doesn't make sense. You have to make sure that you have to look for some kind of a partnership. However, you have to be careful with the word partnership, because everybody calls them these days a partner. So you have to be very clear on that, what that does mean. But I would say that acting like a micromanager doesn't make sense. Telling others what to do. It doesn't make sense, because nobody likes to talk to a micromanager. So as a procurement person, be careful about it. So those would be the two biggest things I would definitely recommend not doing, because it will create a lot of issues.
Yeah. What tactics do you see that are traditional procurement tactics, but that you don't really think that they're going anywhere? They're here to stay.
Yeah, I think that procurement people really have to think about their position. Because if it's only about cost saving, then I think it's a dead end road. It will be a short term situation, but for the time being, many procurement organizations are still being measured on their savings and so on. So I think I would say, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the fact is that in a sales function you're measured on the top line. How much sales can you bring in? Procurement, has to have a KPI on the savings as well. And I think that's forgotten sometimes. People let emotion get in the way of negotiation, right? Otherwise, but I think that you hit on something earlier about RFPs and how you feel like they're rather inefficient in certain ways. Why are teams carrying on with these inefficient tasks? And also, how do you believe like keeping it simple can relate back to procurement? I mean, you gave us some tips earlier, but have you synthesized why you think procurement teams are still on this particular trajectory?
Yeah, they think that they are being in control by telling others what to do, and I think that's a wrong approach. If control is an illusion in that case, because to me it doesn't make sense. So, but they have been educated that way, and it's difficult to change, because that's the way they have been taught that procurement should do their job. But then again, I see many procurement organizations struggle with the business, because sometimes they are not even being involved, or they are being involved very late, or they are seen as being a hurdle they have to take within the organization. Yeah. I think that's not a good position.
Can I ask there then? What it's a two-pronged question. A, why do you think that procurement feels like they need to be in control? And then the second part of that is, how does a procurement team get involved early so that they're not coming into the process too late?
Yeah, so let me start with the last question. So how do you start, or how do you make sure that you are being recognized by your colleagues as a as a procurement professional, and they like to have you in the team. So
Yeah.
first of all, it starts with making things very, very simple and make sure that you understand the business needs. So instead of harassing them with a lot of requirements and stuff like that, I always say, okay, what's your main objective? What do you want to achieve? And then they will say, well, this and that, so and so. And then I think that if those things are measurable, then I'm already fine. And then the second thing I'm telling them is, if you would procure, would you agree that the supplier know better than yourself? And if I find people who are in agreement with me on that, then we will have a great project, because then we can definitely focus on identifying and utilizing a vendor's expertise instead of thinking that we are the expert as a client. So that's the first thing.
That's such a great insight, Pascal. If anybody takes anything away from this episode, it's exactly that. Sorry to interrupt you there.
I hope so, because it's not complicated, but somehow we tend to forget that the main goal is to make sure that we have the best suppliers. That's the main goal, and if we can do that, automatically we will have savings. I'm sure automatically we will have innovation. Automatically you are being recognized as a procurement leader, and being asked for projects, instead of that you have to go to the business and they are not waiting for you. But then, how come that we are so in that control modus and so on? So somehow we are a little bit afraid, or we have the idea that we are being misleaded by our suppliers. And sometimes that can happen, because I'm not saying that every supplier is an expert supplier. But I think that we are very risk adverse. We try to minimize the risk as much as possible as we can. But somehow we forget that actually we should make sure that we are connecting the best suppliers with our own organization, make things transparent, instead of only focusing on trust and partnership or stuff like that, because that's not very easy to explain to somebody. But if you can create transparency by using performance metrics and showing actual results, I think then also the need for control lowers immediately.
Yeah. I was having a conversation about this with one of my team members as well the other day, and I came to this epiphany of, isn't it ironic that as buyers, taught to be keeping cards close to your chest and make sure that you're the one that knows things, in the end you're the one that gets the crap deal.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I always say, for example, if I have a client, or if I'm in a team, and then, for example, they have drafted like a few hundred requirements or questions, I always say, how do you know that you have a complete list? And they never don't. They never do know that. So, but if you have forgot something, immediately you will be at risk. So I tend to turn it around and say, okay, we don't know because we are procuring it, but let the vendor explain us what is needed to be successful. And then in the end, when you are doing that, it's also becoming their plan. So they get a better responsibility. So for example, if I would tell you how to do your job, I would be a micromanager, and for sure you would either leave the company or you will not be very happy. And I think the same goes with our vendors. If we, instead of micromanaging our vendors, give them the opportunity to really show that they are different and that they have the expertise, then I think they also become more, how do you say that? Then they also take their obligation, and also feeling more proud about their profession itself. But so I have a different view on it. And I must say that every time when I do a project, or when we see at a client that they have a bad supplier relationship, most of the time I always say, when you're finger pointing one finger to somebody else, 3 fingers go to yourself. So you have to always look in the mirror and see what you've done wrong yourself.
It's a great phrase. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Pascal. I think that I could talk to you for a very long time. We need to start rounding off, though. I would love to do a quick fire round before we do so our listeners can be able to get to know a little bit more about you as a person, more so than the expert within the procurement space that you are. So, few quick questions, 1 word or 1 sentence answers. You ready?
I'm ready.
Is there a book or a podcast that you would suggest to our listeners? It can't be this podcast either.
Okay, well then the second podcast, or at least no, I would for I love to read. So one of the books I really enjoyed a year ago is a book called Principles for Life and Work from Ray Dalio. He's the founder of Bridgewater Associates, and that really related to me as a person, but also the way I would like to do business with other people.
Great. I am curious about, if you weren't in procurement, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't in procurement.
If you weren't an entrepreneur, if you weren't working in procurement, what would you be doing?
Wow, Sam, what would I be doing?
It's an existential question.
Yeah, indeed. Damn, I need to think about this for a day or two.
All right, we'll move on then. We'll move on to an easy one. We'll move on to an easier one. What's your favorite band? If you can only listen to one for the rest of time, what are you listening to?
Yeah, well, that's maybe a silly answer, but I used to love listening to a Dutch band which is called The Dijk, and specifically the lyrics I like a lot because they're about life and about making sure that you're happy and that you are thankful for everything you have, and so I definitely would listen to that kind of music.
Well, we're thankful that you took the time to be able to be on our episode, and keep thinking about maybe what you would be if you weren't in procurement. And we can take that on the next episode when we have you back for round 2. Sound like a plan, Pascal?
Sounds like a plan, Sam. Always willing to, do a podcast with you. I like the way you talk, and very nice.
Same here. And it's been a pleasure having you on. If any of our listeners want to be able to get in touch with you in a context of learning more about Beyond Procurement or what you guys are doing, how would they best do so?
Just drop a message by going to LinkedIn or visit the website, GoBeyondProcurement.com, and they will be fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pascal, for your time. It was a pleasure having you on.